November, and I picked a couple of lines from the final declaration of the Mandia Cult paper. The paragraph 20 puts attention on research needs. This has been going on for quite a while, the need for integrated analysis, monitoring and measurement of culture and its impact on sustainable development. So yes, that's what we need, and what that is directly connected to is the research-based policy planning, and also what is very important in this final declaration is the need to anchor culture in public policies. In our little project, we have this research part, or research team, and also here we have very dear colleagues from Latvia, Anita Vaivade, for example, and her team from the Academy for Culture. In this research team, they study what is the state of art, where do we stand currently with living heritage and sustainable development interconnections. What have we already achieved or that we just don't necessarily see? But also more. There will be country analysis and case studies based on those pilot examples that are now ongoing. We are heading for a research report, and based on that, to a policy brief to inform us and policymakers on how to put this into action, how to support these this work. To summarize, I am showing this one as the last slide, and I would take your attention to this title: Recognizing and Accepting the Challenges, Understanding the Issues and Seeking indeed local solutions. We know that climate change is vast. Living heritage is only part of the solution, but its importance is really, I would focus on the importance of recognition, like seeing what is crucial with those living heritage practices. Make the challenges feasible at community level and recognize heritage as community actions and practices. I took the liberty here to quote a known Latvian author, Rainis, and I had to use Google Translator to understand this, but I think this is a pearl. Everyone has to lend a hand so that great work goes forward. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Lisa. Every time you would quote Rainis, you would get a round of applause in Latvia, no matter the occasion. So this is a very welcome addition to your excellent presentation. Otherwise, we're very happy for that. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the audience for Elisa and Lena? No, then I'm gonna shoot one question from myself here. We've been focusing on a very practical policy implications for the things we've been discussing here. So Lena and Lisa, would you say what were the most hot and applicable areas where we could strengthen the living heritage with policy?
I think the heritage discussion here in Finland has been the sort of sustainability discussions, and especially around climate. They are used to sort of, it's about buildings and cultural environment. So not often are communities and NGOs, civil society seen as part of this process. So sort of more human oriented look towards this to see the communities as players in this thing. And one example is that here in Finland, we're just about to starting to create a action plan for ecological sustainability in the creative industries. So this is an interesting initiative where you can bring together various players, also including the intangible heritage field, and do something together. But it's such a huge process that it's not enough to have small projects here and there, but someone, in this case, it's the Ministry of Environment with the Finnish Development Fund, to launch such an initiative where we can all participate and find those sustainable solutions.
Thank you. I think this is a great takeaway from Lena And Elisa, thank you so much for your presentation. We greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Paldies, Lene. Elisai, kanākošais.
So we thank Elisa and Alina, and now we would like to invite Signe Puja, the director of the Latvian National Center for Culture. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thankful to colleagues from Finland and everyone who has presented their subjects today. This is very valuable for our joint work that we are doing together. As for the intangible cultural heritage, my first idea was the people who are practicing, they always inherit practices and skills in various traditional areas. And they say that they know the language of birds and animals. It only means that they live in harmony with nature. They can use it and they can cooperate with these people and perceive it as a part of nature. When we were planning the policy of intangible cultural heritage in Latvia, it was a very difficult process. Even though we were among those countries that participated in the drafting of the UNESCO Convention on the Intangible Cultural Heritage, and we were among the 10 first countries that joined it, we only in 2016 got to our own law in this area. And now we have this structured activity where the Latvian National Culture Center is working with other institutions at this policy. But I personally, in 2010, when everything was on the process of under construction with regards to this policy and its drafting, a part of society, of the world, was shocked by the Icelandic volcano, where we were not able to move around the globe. Somebody couldn't attend a conference, a meeting, or a burial of mother, and so on. So then I started thinking about the intangible cultural heritage. These are knowledge and skills under condition that in 21st century people didn't have all this technological progress. We would remain with only skills and practice that would mean survive in nature. It wouldn't seem funny for us city dwellers to stay without electricity and water and everything else, with the experience that we know now, to gather mushrooms, berries, to cook, heat the house, to boil water, and so on. So the question, how would we be able to survive in general? So when we speak about tangible and intangible heritage, which are, of course, interlinked, all these rich resources in cooperation with among people can be protected. This is why right now my interest is to listen to Eva Vitula, who will speak after me, who cooperated with me on this document, and she can share her ideas about another aspect of a certain intangible cultural heritage. So these are some of the aspects in the global network that we have been discussing today, with regards to the traditional expressions and some very modern traditions and our ability to survive further on. I think this is also very important. So our power, because today somebody said this, one thing is to speak and the other is to act. So in intangible heritage, we are working together. We have successfully adopted the principles drafted by UNESCO. These are cooperation among various stakeholders, state, municipalities, NGOs, and huge respect to the communities themselves. So we have an ability to create tools that have been introduced quite successfully in Latvia. We are quite optimistic. Maybe not always are these tools at our hands are really very rich to ensure the community with their action opportunities, especially for those who are able to value and cherish the intangible heritage. Maybe we are not able to educate the entire society, but we will continue doing that with regard to the intangible heritage, to explain why do we need to protect it. Why, for example, it is to come up with your initiative in the Latvian list of intangible heritage in order to find common points with other countries and to start within its progress. As for example, we today had the example of Kuldiga. I will only mention some of the points. What I usually speak about is a continuation of what our Finnish colleagues have said. Latvia has a certain kind of a cycle, and now we are in the 6th year of this cycle as we work with the list of intangible heritage. On average, a year we have 5 to 6 values, which means either a community or municipality or researchers who are the first initiators, and then the cooperation that I have already mentioned, they together in cooperation come up with this proposal for the list. Sometimes we can see some artificial performance, maybe something related to musical instruments, but they need to prepare material, or maybe they have to produce a musical instrument or to express themselves with some instrument, so on. It is all related to environment, and in this conference we also have another event in the cultural center, which is another opportunity to communicate with our inhabitants who work with these traditional skills. This is not stage art, because we have traditionally worked with song and dance tradition. It is a huge event with its own consequences for the 21st century as well. I will only mention now that these values are very diverse, and they can be applied art, for example, and so on, and they are quite evenly spread among types. Maybe we are not here to discuss that, but I would like to mention that if we consider the historic lands of Latvia, then we have Latgale, that has the greatest activity from the point of view of positioning its culture on the Latvian national level. Then the other historic lands, or maybe their municipalities or NGOs, have also participated in some lists. If, for example, we speak especially about the cultural spaces that cover very broad traditions or ways of life and environment with which these traditions are related, then these communities are related to environment, and they enable us to consider everything through this prism of heritage. So here the cooperation that we have with municipalities is quite abstract, to invite and to include items in the intangible heritage lists, and then whether the municipalities are ready to support specific traditions and expressions, so that it is not an end in itself, for example, just for Suiti or Libyans and so on, that it is done just for the sake of itself, but if it's an element of an entire ecosystem that we are currently talking about. As for the international context, One is to focus on tradition, on a certain tradition that might externally look as an artificial expression. Maybe it can be a religious practice. But if we continue the idea of our Finnish colleagues, we cooperate with Lithuanians and Estonians in our song and dance tradition. But then again, of course, internationally, both Estonia and Lithuania with their cultural units have started participation on the level of UNESCO. And as for the song and dance tradition and environment, I'd like to say that we are still on our way. We are still looking for the best practice in order to develop among the participants and spectators, so that we don't damage the environment, but that we can protect our environment. It's a very long process. We do not excel at it yet. We have still a lot of misgivings, but so this festival is so huge and it takes its toll. But for example, here in Latvia, already since 2010, the school youth song and dance festival, we have started thinking about recycling waste by using the public transport and bicycles, and go on foot, to use the bicycle parking spaces, how we can reuse water bottles repeatedly. So we need the water refill points. Now we are already on the road to environmentally friendly memory tokens. The other small details that are used during the festival and for example, the green elements of decoration that are used during the festival. We also think about reusing them as wood chips. The batteries, for example, we have the Daugava Stadium in Measure Parks, up to 60,000 people. We have points where you can reload your electronic devices using solar panels, and other aspects for eco-friendly material, for example, for food containers, is still in front of us, because we still have the food and veterinary service with its requirements. I'm not trying to blame anyone here, but we are trying to cooperate and we are trying to show the best possible example. The activities that happen in a family or in a farmstead and all the way to the Song and Dance Festival is a huge distance, but we still are doing our best to involve everybody, to think on this broader way, how we behave, how we make our life and the life of others around us better. That would briefly be me, because the intangible cultural heritage issues should be solved in other conferences as well. But now I would really like to leave space for Eva with her concrete example of river rafting. And each country, of course, has its own place in the UNESCO intangible heritage, and we got there thanks to this cooperation. Eva, so you will tell more about that, won't you? Thank you anyway for bringing us together to discuss these issues. Thank you. Thank you, Signe Pujada, Director of the Latvian National Center for Culture, and please take a seat in the Presidium for the further discussion. But now we would like to give the floor to Eva Vitola, researcher at the Institute of Arts and Cultural Studies of the Latvian Academy of Culture, with her topic on how green are the raftsmen of the Gauja River. Thank you. I salute everyone who is watching us online. I will try to spend just 10-12 minutes with my 15 slides at the very end of this seminar. So I will try to answer my own question. How green are the Gauja raftsmen? So from the very outset, I'd like to say a couple of words about this Gauja rafting tradition. Most probably this tradition is as old as the waters of the river, maybe from the medieval ages, but at least we are really sure that in the 1800s it was already very, very widespread. So the timber was transferred very regularly up to Sarnikova, where Gauja is floating into sea. It was very hard labor, a hard way to earn money that was sometimes also spent in the pubs. So this is the link between the rafting and the Latvian word for heavy drinking. So about this tradition, of course, the canal of Zvartava that was constructed in 1961 changed this tradition very significantly, because after that the timber started floating to Mazais Baltazars for the wood processing factories, and you can see the way this canal looked. And so then the rafts were replaced by these free floating of timber. And we now know that there were around 200 places for bringing these timber logs, and they were brought up to the Mazais Baltazars. Then this destination were the wood processing factories both in Riga and in Jugla and Sloka. And of course in these water gardens they were sorted, and using a small ship they were transported further through the Jugla lake. And of course the tradition was suspended in 1960s because of the progress of the roads, including the forest roads. But I have also placed in this slide a person from Sigulda, a raftsman who worked in Gauja and Sigulda, and he graduated from the Academy of Agriculture, and he carried out a research that with the costs of railroad and highway transport, rafting would be economically beneficial. But still it was the decision was taken to discontinue rafting and free floating, and this is why the agency was reorganized, and the raftsmen who they didn't have their workplace in Gauja, but they were replaced to forestry services. And we had interviews with Mavis and other raftsmen. They told us that in society that was one of the reasons why the rafting or free floating was the pollution, the elements that are produced by the bark of trees were considered as pollutant. But 30 years later, after this interruption, thanks to the initiative of Martin Geigels, the tradition was revived, and it happened in cooperation with Roman Spolitis and Yanis Vavri, who is the son and grandson of a raftsman. They decided, they didn't even think about in terms of tradition. They just thought that it would be a nice idea just to learn to make rafts. And so they used some trees that were just floating there, and they tried to make them. But they, of course, had to clean them up from the sand. And they damaged several saws, but still later they managed to do that, to assemble a raft and to bundle it quite nicely. But then they interviewed the ancient raftsmen, used their experience and used these traditions, and now for a couple of days every year Gauja again becomes the so alive. Of course, this is now not economically viable, but it is emotional. It is no more a functional tradition, but a more emotional one. And over years, this tradition became quite a successful model that makes it viable. And so every May, between Stręcie and Valka, they are creating these rafts. Then they start the expedition to Stręcie, and on a Saturday they are officially welcoming rafts. So this year we'll celebrate 25 years of this celebration. Everybody is very eager to see this tradition every year. And now it already creates the identity of the town of Stręcie. It is now not only the capital of Gauja raftsmen, but was also one of the international raftsmen cities of Europe. And I think that this was not really planned, but since 1996 it has all led to the fact that these skills got into the Latvian national list of intangible heritage. And as was already mentioned, since 1st December of 2022, it was also written in the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage list. And I think that both these facts are quite significant and will play their role in the further promotion of these traditions. But coming back to our today's seminar, from the practical point of view, the revived Gauja raftsman tradition can be considered green or eco-friendly and correspondent to the circular economy. It is proven by the photos how the timber used for rafts hibernates between the two celebrations every year. The rafts are disassembled and they are brought to the Stręcie building, and they are waiting for the next spring. And one piece of timber, one log, can serve for 3 to 5 years, but then of course it becomes already the wood chip for heating purposes. But thinking about the cultural heritage as a resource for the European Green Deal, then there are of course some skills and knowledge relevant for this raftsman tradition that could be useful to today's people, because assembling a raft is not only a useful skill that requires some physical strength, but also requires a lot of teamwork. It is also a very responsible task, because these rafts can become very long, and when the expeditions happen, they take up to 70 or even 80 people on board, so you can imagine the level of responsibility. And second, these knowledge and skills are expressed as this raft has to follow very steep turns of the river, meanders, and the stream can become very dangerous. There are also possible rip currents, and one has to be quite skillful to travel through them. So we all know, all who live on the banks of Gauja, you know that it has no jokes, but of course it also creates a very close link with nature, because you can imagine that this raft is floating and you have a feeling that you are above this water, and it's May, spring. You can feel the power of the stream, you can hear the birds, the green land, and these feelings are magical for many participants among these raftsmen. A lot of these raftsmen now currently live in Ireland or the UK, but every year they come to Latvia to spend here 2 or 3 weeks to spend this time on this river, to have this experience and to keep these skills. And of course, this experience helps you completely change your environment. You can totally change your life quality and have particular experiences with songs, dance, conversations, meetings. So that was the entertainment part, but at the same time, these expeditions have another aspect about them. Depending on the spring's stream, it can take from morning to evening, but it is also a good opportunity to spend time with nature, with oneself, to let yourself to the flow of water. And I'd like to use this quote from Martin Geigels. It is like a pilgrimage, a meditation. It is a necessity for modern people to find time and space to think about themselves. I have also observed this on our rafting expedition. And the climate change, does it impact the tradition of Gauja raftsmen? It's a rhetoric question, because on the one hand, of course, it does impact them, but on the other hand, maybe not, because without this typical, there is the saying, the raft has to go the raft's way. So this is their responsibility to keep this tradition, unless the Gauja runs dry, of course. So, of course, this is our global and individual responsibility for the Gauja to continue flowing, and keeping the opportunity for this tradition. So this tradition is very closely related to nature and, of course, to the skills that we have inherited. Then at least 1 week a year one can improve one's quality of life. So if you are interested to learn about this tradition, there are at least 3 opportunities. One is you can get in contact with the Gauja raftsmen. This is a very open community of traditions. It is, of course, dominated by males. They are quite silly, but very open-minded and positive. So the first day is a Wednesday, when they are assembling the rafts. You have to phone Janis Vavere, and you can participate, get very actively. We can meet on the third Wednesday of May on the bank of Gauja. I have collected the stories of the Gauja raftsmen in a short story collection, Gauja Splostnieki. You can also go to Sigulda, and close to the city swimming place, there is an open air exposition that is located on a prototype of a raft. You are very warmly welcome. So let's meet either on the banks of the Gauja or elsewhere. I am really very thankful to the organizers of this seminar for inviting me to present this very specific tradition in the context of the climate change that I was thinking about that as something not too significant, but this is not the case. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Vitola, and please join us here for this discussion. And I would also like to invite Baiba Molnika, Secretary General of the Latvian National Commission for UNESCO. This is the last part of today's conference, so please feel free, use your microphones to ask questions or submit your questions on the Slido platform. In this discussion, we have three participants: Ieva Vitola, researcher at the Latvian Academy of Culture; Signe Pujāt, director of the Latvian National Center for Culture; and Baiba Molnika, Secretary General of the Latvian National Commission for UNESCO. So let us start with the questions. Today we spoke about environment, about landscapes, about architectural heritage, about construction and materials. And the last section of today's conference is intangible cultural heritage. You represent different industries, but the topic is similar: intangible cultural heritage. How do you think? How does intangible cultural heritage fit into the broader question of today's conference? Thank you for this question. I would also like to refer to this poll in the morning where you asked who is responsible for adapting to climate change, and I also agree that everyone, including me personally, is responsible for these processes. Intangible cultural heritage is associated with working with communities, raising awareness, and also leading by example your own actions. For this reason, I think that this is our duty and also the duty of our children that we must do. If we litter our planet, then there is nowhere else to go. We will not all just move to Mars. Therefore, I should say that intangible cultural heritage is equally important as other major topics that we talk about when talking about climate action. Thank you, Ms. Pujāt. Ms. Vitola, any comments? Yes. I think that intangible cultural heritage could serve as the main core, namely our knowledge and skills. Talking with people, we can convey this knowledge and these skills, improve quality of life. And intangible cultural heritage can also bring our attention to our unique traditions, such as mushroom picking, also flower crowns that we make in midsummer, also gathering natural herbs and teas. And these are practical examples that people find very interesting. We can tell people that this is also important, this is valuable, and this can help us live better or greener. I think this is the power of intangible cultural heritage. I would like perhaps to ask a provocative question. There are people who are very active when it comes to mushroom picking, berry picking, or traditions in midsummer. But at the same time, they use their Toyota to drive to the supermarket. But they say that yes, I also follow all these traditions when it comes to nature. So how would you comment on such an attitude? Because in Latvia, we have a quite strong living cultural traditions. In my opinion, this is each individual's decision and responsibility. There is a lot of information nowadays. If we teach people that we can use intangible cultural heritage as a resource, as a source that we can use, then people perhaps can understand how contradictory these two attitudes might be. We also have folk songs. This is also an example of intangible cultural heritage that conveys all this knowledge and information. I think we need to appeal to people's conscience, talking about climate change and environmental issues, and hopefully people will try to mitigate these effects. Yes, I really enjoyed this provocative question that you asked. From UNESCO perspective, we are talking about a living heritage. This term living heritage is becoming increasingly more popular, and this is the heritage that is delivered from generation to generation through people, and we are those who are conveying this living heritage to the future generations. Some issues over time are lost in translation, some aspects of this heritage. And the idea is how we can combine the knowledge of our predecessors with the needs of the present day that are so important to us right now. More globally looking, there are such aspects as environment, the economy, and society. But culture is an axis of values that is in the center of all things. So to respond to your provocative question, I don't think we should convince anyone that people should work to benefit the environment. People should work to benefit themselves. This is a major difference. We should stop thinking about intangible cultural heritage as something that we see in a large festival or on the stage where people are wearing certain costumes or performing performing some artworks, but individually each person should become aware of what we know, what we can do, and what we can use, and what we can say to the world with these skills and knowledge. I think you put it very well when you spoke about the values, when you mentioned that we have society, economy, and the environment, but culture is somewhere outside of this picture. People could often ask the question, why should they care about these things if their everyday life is good enough as it is? So let us move to the next question. And perhaps Ms. Pujat could answer the next question. The Latvian Song and Dance Festival was started 150 years ago, but has anyone calculated the environmental footprint of the Song and Dance Festival that takes place in Latvia? Frankly speaking, yes, there has been some progress measuring the environmental impact. We urge the participants of the festival, all the people who are responsible for organizing and participating in this festival, to think about what they leave behind after the festival. Currently, we have not yet measured this environmental footprint, but we have started doing it. It's in progress. It still takes time. Do you think this will be a shockingly large impact or not so shocking? Well, we do not yet have any final results. I think it is better to face the situation head on, even if it perhaps will be shocking, and then we can also understand what we can do. Because this festival takes place in Riga, the capital, and there are a lot of cars coming to the festival, large buses coming to Riga. There's a large impact, and keep in mind that not everyone can even make it to the festival, even with all this traffic. But yes, as mentioned, we are measuring this environmental footprint, we're calculating it. And I'm grateful that there are sharp eyes watching what we do. And perhaps if this environmental impact is too large, would you cancel the Song and Dance Festival? Well, that, of course, is a joke. But taking into account the tradition of the Song and Dance Festival and all these environmental aspects, we could definitely spend an entire conference talking about just this one topic. And I would also like to ask another question about the Song and Dance Festival. Could we use the Song and Dance Festival as a platform to communicate about intangible cultural heritage in the context of climate issues? Well, I do not see why not. The Song and Dance Festival is based on folk movement of song and dance. It is an all-encompassing tradition. I think we should do it. It involves a lot of people. A lot of people are keeping this tradition alive. I was referring to the Finnish speakers who spoke about the Sustainable Development Goals and how intangible cultural heritage could help reach these goals. And the Song and Dance Festival is really one of the most important cultural traditions in Latvia, and there's no doubt that we need this tradition and we need to keep it alive. And at the same time, there are also activities how to make it more environmentally friendly, using less plastic and so on. Yes, this is in the context of having a greener Latvia. I should say that if we talk about these issues, then this could also have a spillover effect on other municipalities where these traditions are also active, and then we could also determine what exactly we could improve regarding to environmental protection. Yes, Ms. Molnika. Thank you. This is a great question. I would like to say that the National Cultural Center and the Education Curriculum Center are also engaged in various initiatives. The question is, what is the Song and Dance Festival on a broader level? How do communities benefit from this festival? It is not just about singing and dancing together. This is a broader pattern, and the word pattern is key here. We should also understand what are these songs that we are singing, what do these folk costumes tell about ourselves and about our country. When we visit some natural places, some rivers or waters, this also helps us understand ourselves. If we understand where we are going, then we gain a deeper understanding in general. Talking about the Song and Dance Festival, talking about symbols, we should understand them and what are their message that we are conveying. There are a couple more questions. Next question. In Latvia, there is a clear divide between maintenance of intangible and tangible cultural heritage. And are there any examples of how tangible and intangible cultural heritage could have a good synergy? I think today we heard a very good example about Kuldig Old Town, about the synergy of intangible and tangible cultural heritage. This is a very good example. And in Riga also we have a Riga Brothers Cemetery. I wouldn't say that there is a shortage of such examples where both types of heritage are in synergy. However, sometimes the target audiences are different and do not listen to one another. Some people think that intangible cultural heritage is only practiced by separate groups, but we should understand that it is the property of each of us. It is our identity. I think when we bridge this gap between these two types of heritage, then we can achieve the synergy immediately. Thank you. About the next question, I would like to ask, could we use rafting skills for some social economic benefits? How can we use these practices and experience of raftsmen? So the question was, could we create environmentally friendly solution using the skills of these raftsmen that you spoke about? So can we use this practice for some economic benefit? Yes, there have been some discussions about these raftsmen. Could we perhaps restore this tradition of moving timber through rivers? Because this is a very green solution. In one season, 100,000 ported, but now we would need 420 liters of diesel fuel. I should say that it is quite unlikely that we could return to this traditional practice. But soon enough, there will be a meeting with these raftsmen. I perhaps could ask them their thoughts on it. The next question is about impact of climate on gastronomic traditions.
It's clear that there are things that could not be found in forest, but now yes. So now yes, yes, it has impact. I think that this is very clearly shown by the fishing cards and salmon used to be very broadly available, but now we don't have these species of fish anymore. Then we had these, for example, traditional cuisine with fish and milk soup, and now we don't have these fish anymore. And in my opinion, I don't know about this tradition, whether it was widespread outside the stage. So what we have said today is that the community itself, or a family, or a personal, an individual, and up to the political decision that will be adopted, there are consequences of this political decision. One is your sea water that is polluted and you don't have fish, then the milk quotas for the milk producers of Latvia, and there was this action when they were giving milk for free. So these elements of the traditional culture, at least in my opinion, the major producers, because of their competition, the small enterprises were went bankrupt and so on. So this ability to hear the long term and to consider these small elements as actually big. Maybe by Molnika as well. Yes, it is important to consider these elements as part of solution rather than a problem. I'm also very thankful to the current situation. The UNESCO has just published a research that shows how the traditional knowledge can help mitigate the reduction of biological diversity. So these are the big things that come from our grandmothers, the herbal infusions and mushrooms. We can find ways to use these traditional elements of knowledge, because all the new things are the well-forgotten old things. Thank you, Madam Molnika. A question. Yes, I'd like to chime up to the cuisine diversity. We often forget that the climate change impacts our plant culture and their viability. Starting from the seeds, one of the elements of this heritage is the seed exchange, the historic seeds and their preservation as heritage. We are asking for some unusual examples, but I, as a representative of libraries, can give you an interesting example how the libraries as institutions of memory. We libraries also have the libraries of seeds, where we come together and exchange in seeds in order to preserve the diversity and the plant viability. Thank you. As I didn't even know about such a seed library. Is it lawful? You can only get legally allowed plants. It's 15:33. You have 30 seconds left. Please come up with the main conclusions, what we have to do. Eva Vitula, will start with you and we'll finish with Baiba. The risks are, in my opinion, one of the risks is the insufficient cooperation between different areas. The intangible heritage is on its own, the tangible on its own, and the biological diversity was an important example. We are moving towards it, and the question is about the tiny seal Arnold, who was saved, who has hibernated, and then he was left free in the sea, and then he deteriorated. He destroyed the fishery. He has eaten the fish from the farming fish, but that was a lot of hard labor by those farmers. So there are a lot of discussions, but I think that it is great that we have such a seminar that has started this conversation. And so we have a lot to do. Thank you. Signe Pujate. To continue what Eva has said, there is this risk of doing the talking but not walking the walk. So it's one thing to think that there are no people who will continue traditions, because as Eva said, it's hard work. And in 21st century, a lot of us prefer to live in comfort. We would be an ideal society if we were able to listen with the ears of nature and to feel with the heart of nature. I can find a lot of positive elements. The tangible and the non-tangible not always come together in life, but from a practitioner to the decision maker and education, an important element. Each of us and all of us together have to continue educating. Thank you, for example. I didn't know about the seed fund. Thank you. We thank Signe Pujata and Baiba Molnika in the very conclusion. The greatest risk, in my opinion, is losing focus in all this story in which we live. I would say that the greatest risk is that what we have received and how we will give it further, not just mechanically, but in a meaningful way. We shouldn't lose it. And also, we have to understand that we are giving forward our essence, our identity. And this is very important to understand when we live in a time when each day brings us a lot of information. I think that the most important is not to lose this focus. What do we want to express and how we want to express it? And right now, I would like to say from the word on behalf of the Latvian National Commission for UNESCO, I'm really thankful to all of you for being here. I thank the Latvian National Heritage Board, the ICOMOS Latvia, everyone who invited us, and success to all of you. Thank you. So we had Signe Pujata, the director of the Latvian National Culture Center, Eva Vitala, the researcher of the Latvian Cultural Academy, and Baiba Molnika, the General Secretary of the UNESCO Latvian National Commission. And in conclusion, I have 6 subjects that, in my opinion, very briefly point out what we have discussed. I would like some of them to stay with you. First, as Mr. Zander said, we don't need to prepare new documents because we just need to use the documents that are already in place to implement them. So we need support in their implementation rather than drafting new documents. In the context of the tangible heritage was the depository, what we heard from Katrina Dambe. Next, the specific legal acts that are necessary for construction to stimulate circular construction. This is also very significant. An important issue that we mentioned, the synergy as an example of culture where tangible and intangible heritage are in harmony, and the local inhabitants believe in these values and adopt them in practice. When the inhabitants protect their own space, they don't even need a policeman. As soon as the community gets involved and shares the same values, it's already a fist that is very strong rather than specific individuals. And of course, community and planning and the landscape planning, which is particularly important for me, and I was provoking in this area, and maybe that was discussed with Maynard, the Heritage Board. So the critical mass for landscape planning and wind farms, they will have a green corridor. The architects of landscape architecture in Latvia are preparing now an open letter inviting to prepare the methodology for evaluating environment impact of wind farms, and a lot of you will receive this letter. So the landscape planning, how can you plan a landscape? And now the wind farm comes and the question is on the table. And it was right at the right moment. No conference, but very practical. Is there going to be this landscape with these rotating planes? Here it will be as big as the TV tower. Yes, we need to bring our resources together, because otherwise this subject will rotate very, very quickly in front of our eyes. And the very last element, the intangible culture that we are living. This is not a mandate from Europe. This is culture that has been here for centuries, and we understand it and experience it, and we consider ourselves as eco-friendly nation. How can we make it something organic rather than something coming from outside? I thank everyone, the Latvian National Commission for UNESCO, the Latvian National Heritage Board, and the ICOMOS Latvia, the saeima Committee for Education, the saeima Committee for Social Matters, the National Library of Latvia, French Institute of Latvia, Faculty of Geography of the University of Latvia. I thank also the students who were among us, and thank all the participants. The representatives of UNESCO will send you the topic points, and we will wait for the next season. Thank you all.